more ChatGPT discussion, and where to join Mastodon. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by the MacVoices Slack, available to all patrons of MacVoices. Sign up today at patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this time the MacVoices Live panel finishes off a conversation about ChatGPT and then switches over to a discussion of Mastodon and which instance to join and why it matters. Let's go back and let the panel do the talking.
So to answer the question, does it always make everything positive for a bio? No. I did Elizabeth Holmes because I figured there's enough data out there it could be pretty accurate. And it's pretty accurate. And it also notes that she was charged with fraud and ends with, and her personal net worth has declined dramatically. Yeah, I think.
Just a little.
Yeah. I don't know. I did want to mention it here in the chat. Brad says, are you thinking Microsoft is smart enough to manage it and will spend human lives to do that? Talking about Microsoft integrating ChatGPT. And so, will Microsoft manage it, or will they just bolt it on as, hey, we have this? And I mean, how many things, and look, we've gone down the Microsoft road before, but how many times have we seen American business, worldwide business sold things because the Microsoft stamp was on it, whether it was good or not? Teams.
Not everything Microsoft does is good. However, Microsoft overall is a company that is pretty smart, pretty savvy, and they're not going to just take a technology like ChatGPT and duct tape it onto Bing. They're going to figure out what from their perspective appears to be the best way to implement this technology. And Microsoft is not afraid to fail and keep hammering away at something until they get it right. So my expectation is that they'll do it, they'll find problems, people will be complaining and saying they failed, and they're going to keep iterating, and eventually they'll get something that actually works pretty well. Whether or not that's enough to make Bing a true competitor to Google, we'll see. I mean, by the time they get that far, Google will probably have made significant advances as well and still be ahead of them.
Brad says it's 1984 again. Typographers hated what people were doing with the new technology, and now eventually people have learned to be more discerning. Interesting comparison. Hadn't thought about that one.
Yeah.
What is interesting, though, and again, folks, sorry, we're putting things in the private chat here, but you can punch them in too into a ChatGPT window and get your own. But so many of these, with Jeff, with the exception of the ones you got for Elizabeth Holmes, I mean, everybody here is respected by their peers. Is very diligent in their professional efforts and education. I mean, it's almost like there's a lot of there's certain boilerplate phrases that are appearing here with slight variations, just because we're asking the ChatGPT to tell us about somebody.
Well, I have a hypothesis on that, and the hypothesis is ChatGPT is assuming that we're asking for bios that could be used for a book jacket or as a conference speaker. And so for bios like that, you're not going to write a bio that says, Jeff Gamet has written for a lot of places, but he sure didn't write for Macworld. And why do you think that is? It's, you always spin it in a positive light. But for Elizabeth Holmes, okay, well, she's in a position where spinning her in a positive light probably wouldn't work that well. So maybe it's looking at that and saying, okay, there's a different context here and giving us short bio that talks about who she was in relation to her company and fraud.
But it could also be that for Elizabeth Holmes, there's a lot of material in the corpus.
Oh, I assume so.
Right. But for these other ones we're looking at, for Dave and Eric, and there's not much. And, you would be a little bit more, Jeff.
Yeah, like Dave's
so,
great,
it's just filling out with this puff, it's just puffing out. Whereas for Elizabeth Holmes, it was able to find enough to, actually generate a reasonably accurate thing. I would assume, the more there is online about some subject, let's hope that, it's going to do a better job. And, what might be nice is if a tool like this would indicate, have like some, like we kept saying, it's so confident. It doesn't matter what it says. It could be where something like, if you have to if you ask me, then I might say, well, here's what I think I know about this person, but, I take it with a grain of salt. I'm not really sure, but ChatGPT never does that. Even if it it just I don't really know too much about that, but I'm not going to tell you that, and it sounds the same, no matter what degree of confidence or what degree of actual confidence it should have. I guess, obviously it's an AI, it doesn't have confidence, but I assume that it, there's probably some kind of scoring in internally as to, how good the underlying, data is, but it doesn't tell you that.
It would be interesting to see if when Microsoft comes out with their stuff, if they add something on the bottom to indicate, multiple sources or confidence levels, or, if whatever gets spit back has, 1% confidence that it's right, the rest is padding, versus 95% confidence and 18 sources, that kind of thing would actually be kind of a useful.
That would be really useful.
But, one of the problems is I don't think, this thing isn't working the way you're thinking it's working. There's no logic behind this. This is ML. It's not artificial intelligence. They just, nobody actually knows how it works. There's not an algorithm underneath this. They just train it with a bunch of data. So, it doesn't work the way that you and I think it would work. It's not generating these things the way you and I would generate them. So I'm not sure that information is even there.
The other thing I was going to bring up earlier is how current is this information? And I was going to ask somebody if they have a ChatGPT window up, because I don't. Type in Chinese spy balloon. And
ChatGPT somewhere actually tells you. Okay, so it's currently the January 30th version. So that's as up to date as it is on information.
Okay, so it's behind on information. I wonder how deep it's going. I mean, is it able to scrape LinkedIn? Is it able to scrape Facebook? And some of the other places, Mastodon, Twitter, where it could possibly gather up valuable and accurate information, especially if it identified you as, being commenting constantly on the state of, whatever on Twitter or Mastodon or Facebook or LinkedIn. That it would improve the accuracy there. So there are a lot of questions here about just exactly what is it pulling from. And because looking at the examples that are passing by here and that I've seen, it looks like there's a lot of stuff here that could, there's a lot of fluff filler that could be eliminated if it had a little more if it had more facts. And if we were writing it, we would be going out and looking for those facts.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, thank you, David, for the Chinese spy balloon.
and you'd think that, my name is somewhat unusual, but it's actually, I'm not very Googleable, because there's a number of other people with that name. And if you go searching for my name, you'll probably find information about them. And for something like this, how would it reliably distinguish which one was which? It's hard even, to do that, for a person to do that.
Fair point, Jim.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There are several Jeff Gamets, and some of the other Jeff Gamets do have at least some level of internet presence because of the, they have companies, and so they have like websites. So why did ChatGPT choose me as the Jeff Gamet that it was going to write a bio for?
It actually didn't.
Wait, this is the other Jeff Gamet. Oh my God.
Yeah, he was the one that was vice president of Mac at the Mac Observer. You were just a hanger-on.
That explains so much. But Jim, I just did a Google search on you where I put your name in quotes, so it has to be literally Jim, right? And you're right.
I think there's a state senator from Illinois, and
there's
I haven't done it in a while, but
vice president of business logistics or business development of AL Logistics, Jim Ray Music, Jim Ray on Facebook, and then on Crunchbase, you as the founder of ProView.
Is this search engine thing really a technology that we can rely on, or is this just a flash in the pan that's...
Well, that's what I asked earlier. And in fact, I mean, Brittany's brought it up, at times about herself, that with Smith as a last name, that
forget it.
That's a real challenge. So, and Jeff, maybe you're just the most visible Jeff Gamet out there. I mean, maybe because
to be fair, I am, and I'm not saying that like in a egotistical way.
No.
But no, you make your living writing stuff on the internet.
Right.
I mean, my name is common too, but there's doctors and lawyers and.
It's the internet's Jeff Gamet.
Now, as seen on the internet.
Yeah.
And Jim Ray Music. Jim, give us a song.
My brother is actually a musician, but he doesn't use his last name.
Yeah, but I bet ChatGPT knows that somewhere, but we won't test it.
There's an author named
knows that he's my brother.
I don't know.
You're going to know more about it than I do in about another 30 seconds.
So, Jim, your most popular book that you've written is called Over the Hill, Grandpa Hikes the Pacific Crest Trail.
Yeah.
I enjoyed writing that book.
Oh, yeah. I have no doubt.
You're still,
and speaking of that sort of thing, there was somebody on Mastodon today was like, put up a picture of old cell phones, and I said, like, well, my first cell phone was actually a car phone, and his response was like, yeah, my dad had one of those. And it's like, oh, this is really bad when somebody replies that, to one of your memories with my dad.
You could be his dad.
Lock.
At least they didn't say grandfather, Jim. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
That's something.
That could happen, but then he probably wouldn't know about it.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of Mastodon, I was reading something at dinner that said that the big, how'd they say it, that the bump is now, or the hump is now a bump or something, that, the average monthly users has dropped dramatically on complaints that Mastodon is just too hard to use.
Oh, is that where I've seen reference to this baloney story? I don't believe it.
Well, I found it interesting because I feel like in the last 2 to 3 weeks, I've gotten more engagement and more followers than on Mastodon by far. Now, admittedly, that they're checking out Mastodon. People are checking it out and finding out who they want to follow. But it seems to be a pretty decent uptake, and more so than even in the 2 or 3 weeks before that. And Jeff, I think you've said that you've had a lot more engagement on Mastodon.
Oh yeah, my engagement on Mastodon is much higher than well, I mean at this point on Twitter, but like at the point where Twitter was bought by Elon, from that moment forward, my traffic started tanking there, or engagement, and it's just been steadily increasing on Mastodon. And now the two places where I have the highest engagement are Mastodon and Facebook.
We had this discussion 2 weeks ago. I wasn't on Mastodon, so the next day I signed up, and now I'm spending significantly more time on Mastodon. Definitely have more engagement. I have 500 followers on Twitter, and now I have 133 on Mastodon already. And I had one post that it was just a silly little post. I reposted a thing on AppleInsider about a Mastodon client for Mac OS 7 to 9.
Oh my God, that was so cool.
Yeah, it's neat.
Well, let me tell you, the Mastodon, it's still getting, it was 4 days ago, it's still getting boosted and favorited. And that has gotten way more engagement than any post that I ever did on Twitter in 4 years. So, for a while, my phone was just like bing, bing, bing. I'm like, oh, I may have to start learning about muting and stuff, that sort of thing, which I never had to do on Twitter. And I still haven't, it's calmed down a little bit, but I'm still, even today, getting, more people seem to be discovering it. And well, I'm on, Dave's asking what server I'm on. I'm on techhub.social, and I'm following you. Although actually, I think I'm just going to keep it, not publicize it. But during this show, I actually signed up for Mastodon.social. I saw an invite, so I have a backup there. But I think I'm pretty happy with techhub.social so far. So, and I guess as long as your instance doesn't go out of business, I think it doesn't really. The Guardian. Okay, thanks for posting that, because I've seen. Web is in. Well, I'm following Web.
Yep, I found you.
Yeah, I think the server. I don't think it it really matters, other than if a server went away. I read a story from somebody that had their server go away, and interesting. I got on TechHub.social on Eric's recommendation, and I kind of did it for a long time just because of what, instance. And so I finally decided 2 weeks ago, I'm just going to do it. And interestingly, a couple of days later, I was on a Zoom meeting, and there was another person on techhub.social. And so I asked him why he was, and he had a really good reason, because he's, and I had seen this, that TechHub.social, they have this financial statement, and they're actually not asking for donations right now, because they're like, we have enough. And here's our financial statement, and what our expenses are, and what our current patrons are. And this guy said that he had looked at a bunch of instances and looked at that and said, oh, they are publicly showing that they are in good financial shape, so that's why he picked them. It's like, and that seems like a good reason. So I felt pretty good about that. And I don't have, I guess there's, I'm not involved in the local instance. I've never looked at the feed from it. I just have come up with followers, and and I don't know if you can still do it. I did use Data Finder, and brought over a bunch of my followers from Twitter that I could find, because if people and if I don't know if it still helps or not because of the bots being shut down on Twitter. so maybe they don't work at all. But you should put your Mastodon handle in your Twitter bio, and these automated tools can find it, or even manually if somebody can find it. So, and I'm still finding people pop up that I guess maybe they hadn't done that, and I got a couple people today that are like, oh, I was following them on Twitter, but I'm not on Mastodon, but there's their handle. So, it doesn't, and I really like Ivory. I don't really like the web interface very much, but with Ivory, it's very smooth.
This edition of Mac Voices is brought to you by the MacVoices Slack, available to all patrons of Mac Voices. Sign up today at patreon.com/MacVoices. Web asked what difference the server makes, and I think that's really interesting what you just said, that you don't follow the local server feed, because I don't either on mine. And that's where I wonder if the whole federated server not breaks down, but just it adds a layer of complexity that I wonder what percentage of Mastodon users care about the fact that there is a quote unquote local feed on their server, as opposed to, well, I don't know what server to sign up for, so Jim's on this one, or Webb's on this one, or Jeff's on this one, so that must be good, I'll go there. And
this is totally anecdotal, Chuck, but I have quite a few followers on Mastodon who are on specific servers because it's a server that whatever the focus is matters to them. For example, there are quite a few people that I'm interacting with on Mastodon that I interacted with on Twitter, and they all joined a Mastodon instance that they created that's all about Boulder politics. And so they went over there, and they have their server feed where they can just see all of the stuff that's happening locally, and then they're interacting with people outside of that. I'm on Mastodon.social because I signed up for that years ago, and my feeling was this is a server that started by the people that created Mastodon. It has a higher likelihood of being stable and sticking around. But anyhow,
although it had an outage last week.
Yes, and they were hit with a denial of service attack.
Yeah, so they're also a target.
Yeah, so maybe I should have thought about that when I signed up for their server. But anyhow, I do have people that follow me where the server they're on actually does matter to them.
That's thank you, Jeff, because that's a really great example. And I haven't dug into it that much, but because here we go. It's the classic thing of that's not my use case, so it really doesn't matter to me. But that makes perfect sense. It sounds like a Mastodon server has the potential to turn into almost like one of the old bulletin board systems, but then with a channel out to the internet, or excuse me, out to the rest of the Fediverse.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of what it is. But, you don't have to really, the thing is, like, I kind of participate in different communities. So those people have decided that Boulder politics is like, that's the most important thing. And that's great, but, I don't really want to have to be signed up to that server for that. And, some iOS developer server for something else. And, that would be a mess. So
that would be a mess.
I'm just, and interestingly, it's like the Apple developer community, it's like almost completely moved from Twitter over to Mastodon now. And it's which is part of why, it's been so great for me. Because, in fact, actually, so a number of people even like, oh, hey, Jim, you're here. That's great. So that's kind of nice. and a lot of people that I was following on Twitter that have just disappeared from there. And, so now I'm back and I'm like, oh yeah, here are these voices that I knew. Now, I haven't stopped going to Twitter. In fact, I was telling Eric, it's kind of like programmers have a joke about technology called regular expressions. They're like, if you have a problem and then you decide to use regular expressions to solve it, now you have two problems. Yeah. So that's kind of how I feel. Like, Twitter has a problem, so I'm going to move to Mastodon. Now I have two problems because there's still people I want to follow and communities I want to follow on Twitter, and so it's almost like two. It's very weird going back and forth. It's very the one thing, the Mastodon experience is very positive right now. And on Twitter, it's like, well, that's where there's, a lot of people talking about Ukraine stuff, which you hear about, but it's not, it's kind of, so on Mastodon, I see, and one today that I love not being any, here's a 1 out of 25. They're short limit, and we'll write a longer post.
It's like, Jim, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm sorry. You are badly breaking up. We are getting like every third word.
That's not good.
No, I don't know.
Yeah, because they're all conjunctions.
Yeah.
Junction. What's your function?
I don't know. I'm, another time.
No.
Just say every word 3 times and then go to the next word.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, could your AirPods
battery
be AirPods Max battery be dying?
I don't know.
Because you were so strong for a while and then it just really started to break up there at the end.
It's ChatGPT. It was listening and it knows that Jim is critical and now he will pay.
You will pay.
I don't want to, I want to make clear here. I have nothing against Mastodon. I'm obviously on Mastodon. I'm engaging with people, and so that's great. It's a different model, but it also, I think Jim's comments about the developer community moving over, it just goes to show you just how important social media is in developing some of these communities that are geographically dispersed.
Mm-hmm.
But it benefits everybody, including those of us who are not in the community, to have them exist. They need a place to exist. So whether it's Mastodon, Twitter, or something else, did anybody sign up or see T2? I stumbled across that and asked for
T2?
T2.
No, what is that?
I haven't heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it appears to be I don't want to say Twitter clone. Looks very similar to Twitter. I've requested my username and haven't received it yet, so we'll see. But you have to feel like somebody out there is going to come and try to fill these gaps.
E2.social?
I think that's it. Yeah, Jeff.
Yep, I found it.
All right, I'm joining the wait list, so I'll have my name.
There you go. There you go.
They're using my Google Forms.
Oh my God. Seriously?
They are.
Yeah, I clicked that and I'm like, oh, wait, that's not the right email. Wait, this is a Google form.
Yeah. So, again, I feel like, I don't know how this is all going to shake out, but the need for those online communities is definitely there. And the big question is how do you fund the infrastructure?
Can you hear me now?
Now you're good.
Yeah. I think it's something wrong with my Bluetooth because my mouse is not working very well either.
Oh.
There's another new thing called Spoutable. Have you guys heard about that?
Mm-hmm.
No. What's Spoutable?
It's another Twitter clone. It just opened a few days ago. It looks nice, but and I have an account, but I haven't figured out anybody to follow. And most of the time when I get on, it's pretty slow.
This MacVoices Live panel is back one more time to talk about why Instagram works as a social media, what we might expect from an iPhone Ultra, and why I'm wrong about Apple Pencil support for the iPhone. And I was wrong. That's next time on Mac Voices. We'll see you then. As always, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.